Welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. We've got the NIA boys here. Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value, Trung Phan, me, Master Flex himself, and this is Bilal Zaidi as always. Boys, we got a big one to go through today. It's been a heavy week. So let's just let people know what we're talking about today. We're talking about Bitcoin all-time highs. Obviously, we need to get the Fiat fan reaction since he's up heavy. We're going to talk about Bitcoin ETF, what that kind of means. We're going to talk about Facebook being a Metaverse company. And then also Apple had a big event and they talked about their new M2 chips. We're going to talk about how Apple shook Intel and how that's evolved over time. And then the last section, we're going to talk about keeping your NFTs secure. This is something really important we've been wanting to do for a while. There's been quite a few hacks like the Creature Toads hack, which we'll give a summary of as well. And if we get time, we'll talk about Square on the 4D chess that's still going on. So, boys, let's kick it off. Fiat fan, how you feeling, mate? You're definitely up from the time that you bought it live on the pod.
Okay, so what is the dollar count? What are you guys seeing right now for BTC and ETH?
Bitcoin is 66,357. Ethereum is $4,098.69.
There we go.
Oh my goodness,
it's meant
man.
to be.
Well, I mean, we should go back to the episode because it was funny. I was waffling around episode 5, right? So like I had the money lined up, nothing crazy, but like we had Packy McCormick on the episode, and then you guys were like, "Hey, who's custodying the funds? Like who's holding the coins? Are you sure you want to do it like this?" And then you guys actually saved me because it was at like 2,500 ETH and like 40,000 Bitcoin when you told me to hold back. And then it dipped again. I'm like, guys, if I wait and try to time this thing, it's never going to happen. So it turns out I actually timed this recent one perfectly. I got ETH at 2K and then Bitcoin at 30K. But here's the other part that's hilarious. I bought some more at 55. And when I told Jack I bought it at 55K, I went, Jack, I bought Bitcoin at 55K. I'm clearly all in. Jack, what did you type to me? You're like, you didn't buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, because you did say something negative about it, right? You said I think it because there was a little dip after you bought it. You're like, I said, no, Trung, you didn't buy Bitcoin. You preserved your wealth behind an encrypted wall of energy. Pulled a Michael Saylor line out.
I was going to say that sounds like a Michael Saylor one.
Every time you're in doubt about your purchasing decisions with regards to Bitcoin, just stick a little Michael Saylor podcast on and all will be well.
Get the pump going.
Yeah.
In more ways than one. Yeah. So, but Trung, you're up. You're up now. Well, everyone's up.
I am up.
Everyone's up because it's all-time high. That's a mathematical, not mathematical advice is what I say.
Okay. Am I losing you guys? Because what I will say is this. I'm up. Okay, I'm up, whatever, 2x. It feels awful because I could have put that money into a Toad or a Bored Ape Yacht Club and I'd be up 30 times, right? I mean, Bilal, you brought this up last week. This is just a new reality we live in.
Man.
2x gains in 3 months. They're unacceptable. I'm so unhappy right now.
And I have to say the Toads, to be fair, are down since the last time we spoke significantly. So yeah, a big part of what's fueled the Bitcoin all-time highs, and we don't know what the price is by the time you're listening to this, but hopefully it's kept going up, is this Bitcoin ETF approval. So let's quickly talk a little bit about that. Like, what exactly is this? Because for a lot of people who don't follow this space, you're used to buying stuff in ETF form, like a Vanguard index fund or something like that. And essentially, from my understanding, an ETF is going to allow a lot more people into the space, obviously, like from institutional investors to people who can't custody Bitcoin themselves for like legal reasons. There's like a bunch of reasons for that. But yeah, is there anything else to add on the Bitcoin ETF? I mean, the one thing I want to call out is it's a futures-based ETF. Do any of you know what that means? I feel like Trung might know.
Sounds like a CFA question.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're going to have to update their curriculum if they want to stay relevant, right? So, I mean, a good analogy is the gold ETF, right? GLD, which is the most widely bought gold ETF. I think they have 25 billion in gold. So the gold ETF, GLD actually holds the gold, right? They actually own the gold physically, or they store it somewhere. And then they issue shares out essentially of this ETF, which you can buy. And the part of the ETF function is that you can redeem and create shares, which helps fluctuate, the ETF with the underlying asset price like pretty well. Like right now, there isn't an ETF, but there is the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which was the one a lot of people used to purchase instead of in lieu of an ETF the past few years.
How does the structure of that differ from an ETF?
So I think the creation, the Grayscale is closed, right? So what that means is they can't create and issue new shares. It's like it's much harder for them to track Bitcoin exactly. So at different times, they'll have a large discount or large premium to the underlying price of Bitcoin. But having said that, is like if you have zero tech ability like me, fiat fan, you're better off getting the Grayscale than doing nothing, right? Which is what I made the mistake of doing like a year ago. I wanted to buy Bitcoin. I literally couldn't figure it out because I'm just a total noob. And and a lot of the Canadian accounts were throttling how much you could deposit. And I'm like, a year ago this time, I'm like, listen, I just want to put 50K into Bitcoin. Can somebody just tell me how to do this? And there's just nowhere where they would let me do that at that amount at that time, right? But if I just done Grayscale, I could have done that because I had the money in Fidelity. And Fidelity can buy and sell Grayscale. I didn't do that, so lost out a lot of the gains, and we made fun of me, which is great. But how the Bitcoin ETF this is being called the Pro Shares is it's a futures based because there's very specific reason as to why. The U.S. government and the SEC hasn't determined how they want people. They haven't created all the rules around custodying Bitcoin, right? They haven't made it very clear to every institution. It's like, hey, if you're going to custody Bitcoin for your clients, these are all the rules you have to have in place. However, they have futures regulations, right? So there's a very long list of commodities futures trading regulations. So basically, this is a future-based ETF, and the U.S. government, the SEC didn't condone this, but they also didn't stop it because they know that because it's futures-based, that it's under the purview of the CFTC, which is the Commodities Futures Exchange, or whatever it's called, the commission. I think it's a Commodities Futures Trading Commission. So this is under the purview and has the protections of at least some agency which has set out guidelines for futures, which is the reason why. And then I saw a lot of like memes of people being like, you know what? The really funny one actually from that Jerome Powell Twitter account. It was just like what Bitcoin is versus the Bitcoin ETF. It's like, I'm not going to say what it is, but the whole point being like, you guys might have saw it. It's probably not safe for work. But the whole point being is like, why would you buy Bitcoin ETF, futures ETF, when you just buy Bitcoin? And it's actually for all the reasons just laid out, right? There's idiots like me, like that are quote unquote tech savvy that can't even figure it out, right?
And that's the thing. So for anyone listening, for most people, buying Bitcoin directly is already fine, right? But like you said, there's just
Coinbase, there's still a lot.
There's a lot of places you can already do it, but there is a whole segment of people who just feel comfortable at this scale, and kind of like we talked about last week on the Web3. Kind of like checkpoints or whatever the phrase is we used, inflection points, sorry. Like to me, this is one of the big ones as well, right? Like where, like the big institutional people see this as a positive signal, essentially. And there's been 100 of these signals, but this is just another big one. So anyway, we've seen things pump. We've broken the all-time highs, which has been, Bitcoin has basically been trading sideways kind of for like 6 months or so, like kind of went down and went sideways for ages. At the time of recording, Ethereum hasn't broken the all-time high. I think we're still a couple $100 off that, but it's basically pumped quite significantly today. So October, as people had talked about, and Q4, the Q4 pump seems to be kicking off like a lot of people had been predicting. Is there anything else to call out on the ETF?
So one thing I was going to say, I think Pump tweeted this, that there was $570 million of deposits. Yeah, I think $1 billion of trading volume, but 570 million capital behind it as of one day of trading. And what did you say? Gold was at GLD is at 25 billion.
Yeah, I think that's what they have under.
Comparison.
I don't know what their daily volume is though. I think I'd have to check that, but it's obviously much higher right now. The other thing I'd actually, Jack, you mentioned this in our Twitter, three-way Twitter DM. You sent a tweet from Raul Pal, the legend from Real Vision, a longtime investor, finance guru. He was making a great point though. Is like he was not crazy about the futures ETF, even though it's a step in the right direction. But I think he said something to the point of like it's just another middleman getting in the way of like, you know what I mean? It's like he brought up actually Scaramucci, Anthony Scaramucci, the big investor that worked with Trump, the White House for 10 days.
The mooch.
The mooch. But his whole point about the mooch was like, so the rise of Bitcoin let so many people that would have been shut out the opportunity to build wealth. But then Scaramucci goes out, raises whatever, $400 million and institutionalizes his purchase of Bitcoin. And nothing wrong with this at all, but like, he, in absolute dollar terms, might walk away with more than, a lot of everybody else that have these chants. Punters, like regular Joes like you and me, like 10 years ago that put in, or like Bilal Zaidi in 2017, throwing a couple shekels into Bitcoin. But like, even though he's up 1,000x, he only put in how many dollars. Scaramucci comes in here, puts in 400 mil, even though it only 10x is, his absolute dollar gain is massive, right? I think that's what the point that Raul was trying to make, or Raul, sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it right, is it's just that this was meant to be decentralized and for democratized finance, but it looks like, good old finance is just getting their hooks in there.
Well, yeah, and I think it's like just where the capital is stored, and to like your point, Trung, like if you're not like someone who writes about finance is interested in finance, and that's like kind of your professional focus. Yeah. If you're not in a position to buy Bitcoin, then how many people are there that are underneath your level of understanding,
right?
And how many people have their investable assets either in a 401k or like they're not personally making investment decisions and like moving capital in and out of like allocations. So yes, I think there's like, it's kind of there's a argument to be made that it's against the philosophy, but there's another argument to be made that like, if you wait for everyone to figure out how to self-custody it, then how much of the run-up that people miss out on, and
totally,
it's just it's kind of the way the world functions, and that we're getting to the point of the Trung's mum with the metal engraved key under the kettlebell. If that's the entry point, then you're not going to see Bitcoin hit 100x what it is today.
And I was gonna, you mentioned Scaramucci or the mooch just now, Trung. I listened to something with him a little bit earlier today, and he was talking about, I mean, he's really down a rabbit hole, by the way. Like, I don't know if you've heard him talk about this stuff, but he seems to be pretty down a rabbit hole. Obviously, that's a big part of his business, right? But he was talking about sovereign wealth funds, and kind of like he was talking about basically rich Arabs that he represents their money and like looks after their money. And 6 months ago, when things were starting to drop, they were getting worried, and he had to fly out there and convince them like, hey, look, this is a long-term play, et cetera, et cetera. And but he was saying like something like this, like the ETF, even if it's just a futures one, again, it's that kind of seal of approval for someone who is more old school. The same way a Forbes article is a seal of approval for someone like from a certain generation, even if we might not care that much about that. But like ultimately, if you want to get to 1 billion wallets, is what he was saying, you do need all of these things to kind of keep things moving in motion.
It's network effects, right? It's like you have to tap into the institutions that have network effect more so than rely on building network effect from scratch. Maybe a good analogy as well is like angel investors versus like publicly traded companies. Like obviously there are financial rules around that. So, but forget that for a second. If the accredited investor laws were wiped out tomorrow, how many people are going to be confidently cutting angel checks versus people that are buying a couple shares of something that's listed on the New York Stock Exchange? That to me is like just even like take the technical stuff out of it for a second. Like you said, it's like got a lot to do with institutional approval. And if you spend time on like crypto Twitter, maybe your understanding of most people's view of the world is a bit out of whack. I'm on holiday with my in-laws at the moment, and believe me, they're not going and self-custodying any Bitcoin or Ethereum anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I'll mention is I also listened to SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, who we talked about last episode, I think. And he did a great interview with the Invest Like the Best guy. Really good interview if you want to check it out. But he was also talking about kind of like all the regulation stuff. There's still so many steps to get to the next stage. And he thinks like obviously regulation is fine when it is there to protect people or whatever. So I'm probably butchering like a summary of what he was saying. But again, this is all in my head anyway, all positive steps. It's not like anything negative about it, except I don't fully understand the impact on price in terms of like the futures versus spot. And then secondly, yeah, of course, if everyone put that money directly into the network and, you know, it was on the actual blockchain and everything like that, then there's a positive side to that as well. But yeah, I think that's kind of the summary is a positive step. Things are moving in the right direction, and brings us on to the next topic, which is big tech kind of doing some crazy stuff. So Facebook have an event, and they officially have come out and said that there will be a Metaverse company, I think, right? So what do you guys take from this? You know, like this is a word we use quite a lot in the stuff we talk about in Web3. And it seems like a lot of the big tech players are almost like scared to use that word. So I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I'll jump in super quickly and just talk about, we're going to talk way more about this next week. So let's just say that first, when the actual event happens is October 28th. So actually by the time people start hear this, the event's probably happening that day. So we don't want to look totally dated. But the first thing is Zuckerberg wants to rename the company, rebrand the company. And he said it's because they want to be known as a Metaverse company, which is just so cringe on so many levels. And like, obviously crypto Twitter just took him to shreds over it. But you know, for Zuck, it's very simple. It's like, he's been trying to claim a platform for since the beginning, essentially, of Facebook. So like, there's a very famous email about a decade ago that came out. He wrote to his team internally why they wanted to buy Unity Technologies. They are the game maker that competes with Epic. So Epic and Unity are the two biggest gaming engines in the world. And Unity actually, I think, might have done Doom and Quake. But they're a massive company now. They're like $40-50 billion company. But the whole point being is like in that email he wrote to his team is like he wanted to own a platform, and that ended up being his VR play, and he wanted to kind of own that entire world. It's because, and we're seeing it now, he knew how much he was at the whim of Apple, right, and smartphones, and he knew that. And we're seeing it now. Apple's completely kneecapped Facebook's advertising business, not like existentially, but like materially, like 5 to 10% of their revenue has been hit by Apple's new privacy rules that we've talked about, which basically asked any iPhone user if they want their data to be tracked. It's asked in such a way where you're obviously going to say no, right? And actually the article came out from the Financial Times saying that not only has it materially affected Facebook's business, it's affected almost all other digital advertisers, and Apple's share of advertising on its phone has just exploded. Not a shocker, right? People are dumping money to now rank on top of Apple's App Store searches. They did it before, but now with these new privacy rules, it's just gone through the roof. So I'm saying all that. We'll talk more about it the next time we catch up. But so Zuck's he's been looking for the next thing, right? It's just and he wants to own it because even though they're a $1 trillion company, they're literally at the whim of Apple, right? And they're getting kneecapped by a bigger competitor. And so that's why he wants to rebrand it and move into this direction and capture the mind share. But then, Jack, you sent a really good thread from one of these crypto punk profile picture accounts. But what was his general message? Why was he saying that Facebook was doing this? It had to do around status and kind of like why there's a kind of setup to fail.
Yeah, so the observation made, we put it in the Telegram group, so jump in there. And the observation he made was basically like the social signaling component of all the Facebook products is waning. So the curated influencer lifestyle, or the photograph in front of the Lamborghini, or the private jet that you rent for 10 minutes, or it's like the toilet bowl next to the washing machine, that trick.
Yeah.
That NFTs is
jet.
kind of exactly. NFTs are bringing this social signaling into a new level. It's like there's check the chain type, if we want to hark back to that idea, where people's social status and their membership of certain groups and the time at which they knew about something, which I think is another interesting social signal, right? Not all of this is about how much money you spent on something. A lot of it has to do with like provable record of, the first person to listen to this band, or the first like person to share this thing. I think this person's looking at it from a, like, obviously really heavily invested in NFT culture. And maybe like my counter to it would be, maybe Facebook is like not as close to like the highest social signal platform there is. Maybe
right.
Like the TikToks and the Snapchats and the platforms that serve younger people more specifically are closer to that. But essentially saying the writing's on the wall, because online behavior is changing and Facebook doesn't have the apparatus to enable its users to participate in the new tier of social signaling. But from all the demos and stuff that I've seen, a lot of it feels like was it CNBC who went on some TV show and did like a virtual reality
a virtual conference
thing.
room meeting, a virtual board meeting, and people are like, "Yo, this is like your idea of the future."
Which honestly I think is like closer to what it's going to be than a lot of people are anticipating. Like, I don't think it's their core competency to like build some like hyper cool, compelling, culturally relevant thing, right? Facebook's kind of like it's an infrastructure. It's the rails. Like, they're not Fortnite. They're not like a company that produces cultural artifacts that people care about. They just make products that are the rails for that stuff. So I don't know. I think I think they already kind of serve a segment of the population that is maybe not as bleeding edge as they're going to need it to be in order to compete in that world. But I also think the NFT world is kind of interpreting like the metaverse word is just such a ridiculous like catch-all buzzword, and you can interpret it however you want, right? He might just be referring to like literally VR, like he's going to put the Facebook feed in VR or something, right? Like, we're a metaverse company. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see it in the same way that all of their other products haven't kept up with like the fast-paced. Maybe I'm a little wrong there, because I'm thinking just about the Facebook platform. Maybe Instagram keeps reasonable pace with the world of culture, but I don't know. I think Facebook has been like, the age of the average Facebook user has only been increasing with time. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, like Facebook.com, but I mean, and the app obviously versus Instagram.
Well, we will say this, like they do own VR. There's no question about it, right? Whether or not VR is the next platform, I mean, they have created the best goggle set. They are onboarding developers. I think the number they said, they need to get the Quest to 10 billion like active users, which is not an insane goal, right?
What do you mean?
Wait, you said 10 billion or 10
Sorry,
million?
10 million.
All right. I was going to say.
But it sucks.
10 billion. Guys, not insane whatsoever. The most reasonable goal. No, but I think, Jack, you brought up a great point, and it kind of touches on how bad I was at buying Bitcoin, but like, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to know how to go into Discord to interface with NFT culture, right? And not even to say that this is what the metaverse is. I mean, your main point was like, who even knows what this thing is supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
By the time this episode comes out, they would have talked about it more, which is the one a big drawback of the nature of our recording. But, we do evergreen funny stuff. You guys are going to listen anyways.
Yeah.
Bilal, the question I had for you is, you are working at a company called Alphabet. So Alphabet, for people that don't know, that's the parent company of Google. No, but dude, you were there. You were there for the rebrand from Google until the holding company known as Alphabet, which is basically, so why don't you tell us when that happened in 2015, what you were doing, how they split up Alphabet into these different organizations, the rationale behind it, and how nothing's changed.
Yeah, well, I was actually in Mountain View the day that it got announced. No one had an idea, like a regular employee like me didn't have any idea until the announcement. So it was kind of announced basically externally, internally, pretty much the same day, I think. Maybe because it got leaked, I don't know. And I just remember reading it and thinking, what? Like, this seems so weird. Like, the Google at the time anyway was the number one, number two, like recognized brand in the world, right? Like alongside Apple and a few others. And it just felt kind of like, well, you've already got all this goodwill at the time, goodwill, maybe 5-7 years later, it's a bit different. Why are you going to just like mess around and change the name? But then when you start reading it, you're like, okay, they're building this huge empire. They've got all these companies they've bought. And then they're going to have to restructure eventually. So they eventually bought Ruth, the CFO, in. And also the company was just growing at such a crazy rate, right? So it becomes like a cluster of companies. So I think that was the logic, apparently, anyway. So yeah, I don't know enough. I mean, I think people speculated at the time that eventually they would have a company with every name, essentially, right? So
for each letter.
Yeah, each letter of the alphabet, which they're probably not far off because there's probably like 20, 25 divisions or something like that. I mean, there's like 6 to 8 core ones, but if you include all the acquisitions and stuff like that as well, I don't know the exact number. So it kind of made sense, but I don't know. Yeah, what did you guys think from the outside, like when that happened? Does it make a difference to you as like a regular consumer or whatever?
Well, I think most people would agree that in 6 years, not a single person actually said the word alphabet.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Oh my God, I love alphabet.
If you ask anyone what alphabet is, most people don't know what it is.
What's the fourth biggest company in the world or fifth? It's like, oh yeah, Alphabet, man. Of course, everybody thinks Google, right? It's just so insane that you take. I mean, this must drive Jack to the cliffs, man. It's like you take the lindiness of the word Google, and then you try to tuck it underneath. It just doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, it becomes a verb, and then you use something else.
Totally. Well, I understand like why they did it. They wanted to basically seal off the crazy moonshot projects, right? And this is all as Larry and Sergey kind of leaving the company and handing the reins off to Sundar, now the current CEO. But I think what's funny, and you mentioned it, man. So Ruth Porat was also the CFO at Morgan Stanley, and she's like the Forrest Gump of like tech. A lot of people don't know, but in like 2000, she basically saved Amazon and Jeff Bezos. She was working at Morgan Stanley and basically went to the CFO of Amazon. It's like, you guys should raise money now before the market crashes. And like, I mean, the team Amazon talks about it, like she was able to make them raise over $500 million right before the crash happened and basically help them survive it. So she's like, has this long reputation in kind of tech financing. And I mean, what the running joke in fintech is like, she's a Terminator. She's like taking out all these moonshot divisions, right? She's like looking at them one by one and just taking them out to the shed and like shooting them in the head. And like, it's just like, she's just a total finance, like CFO professional. She's like, all right, where are we making money? Where are the money sinks? Where are the cash flows? And Google, as we well know, is up like 40% this year, right? It's up like double since the bottom of the pandemic.
Yeah, they killed it.
The ad machine has not stopped, right? I mean, I think that's a running joke. They did this massive rebrand, but the company, 90% of its revenue was advertising 6 years ago. 80% of the company's revenue is advertising now, right? Like nothing's changed.
But I think what people miss on that with us taking the whole episode on it is the mix between the ads, right? Because YouTube has become a much bigger, significant part of that. And because it's like you go from just search ads to display, programmatic, all that stuff, as well as video. So I think, and then there's cloud as well, which I know they've basically lost to Amazon, but still it's growing pretty well for them. So, all right, talking of big tech, we've also got something we want to talk to you guys about, which is Apple getting Intel shook, right? So There was an event this week. They've been killing it with this M2 chip, right? Like now, for people who don't know what this is, who wants to give a go at explaining what this is versus Intel? Because we've all grown up with Intel Pentium processors. There was AMD as well. They were the two dominant ones.
Yeah.
And in recent years, Apple has taken a different approach. So maybe Trung, do you want to explain what's been going on?
Let me walk through this. And I know Jack has some thoughts about Jack Dorsey and what he's going to be doing with Square and potentially Bitcoin silicon chips. But let's talk about Apple. This is actually so fascinating because of how large. I mean, so we all know semiconductors are the new oil, and it's just this massive industry, right? Like multi-trillion-dollar industry. And what's just gotten crazy is that Apple now manufactures the most powerful chips in the world, or like their designs are the most powerful. You think about how crazy that is, right? So like they're already the best consumer company in the world, and now they're designing the best chips. It's unfathomable. So what happened was there's a couple pieces of Intel. So Intel, obviously, the name Silicon Valley, basically, Intel is an integral part of that, right? It's like Intel came out of Fairmont Semiconductors. 8 people left that company in the 50s, which is a big semiconductor firm, and they started Intel. And Intel became obviously the biggest semiconductor company in the world for the second half of the 20th century. And what happened with them and Apple's is very interesting because 2 things happened. So the first thing that happened was that Apple went to Intel in the mid-2000s. Steve Jobs went to Intel and says, "Will you manufacture a mobile chip for me?" And Intel said no. The reason Intel said no, and it's a brutal quote, but you'll read the CEO, who I believe actually has passed now, but at the time, the CEO said something to the effect. And, totally fair. The random numbers are like, based on what Apple's asking for, it doesn't make sense for us to manufacture this chip because it's too low margin. And the only way we can make it up is if they do insane volumes. So they underestimated 2 things. They underestimated the amount of volume that iPhones would do. Fair enough. And they made the decision based on margin because their existing chips in laptops and data centers were very high margin businesses. So totally fair business plan, right? They just had no idea where the iPhone was going to go. So that's the first part, is Intel lost out on the mobile revolution. The second thing that's happened here now is that, so the announcement last week was that Apple released a new line of laptops that had the M1 chip, which is their own personal chip for laptops. And this has been a 12-year journey for Apple to remove Intel from their own laptops. And the reason they're doing it, I mean, there's 3 reasons, right? It's just not because it's not like they're being assholes. It's because, Apple has always controlled the software and hardware experience. That's why they get to overpay or overcharge you for the iPhone, right? They're bundling the software and the hardware together. And they're doing the exact same thing with the chips. So they're basically saying, if you want this high performance M1 chip, you have to buy an Apple laptop, right? I mean, there are some downsides to that. It loses some of the customization ability that you'd have. But basically, the M1 chip has better performance. Apple can capture higher margins from it, and they have way tighter control over the experience. So like as a consumer, you're going to want the M1 chip, right? You're going to want the full controlled experience if you want to buy a laptop. You're going to pay for it, but you have a way better experience. And the only things I'll add is that this has been 12 years in the making. So again, Intel lost the mobile business, but then how they lost this other part of the business was that Apple realized, and it's always been their philosophy, they want to be fully integrated. They're like, we know that we're going to have to control the chip, and that's what they've been doing over the past 12 years. So the highest price acquisition ever was Beats by Dre for $3 billion in 2014. And then the most consequential acquisition ever was then when they acquired Next Computing, which was the company that Steve Jobs had started. So that was in 1997. But then if you were to add the third one that you're going to put on like the most well-known acquisitions, in 2008, they acquired PA Semiconductors, which is a semiconductor firm. They brought talent and IP in-house. Over the next 12 years, they started developing iPhone chips. This is the A1 and iPad chips. So like, they've been working on this for 12 years, man. And somebody made an amazing tweet. They basically said like some of Steve Jobs' bet are just paying off now, right? So like that's basically what happened with Intel.
That's awesome. Trung, or either both of you, like, have any of you got any of these new Macs, by the way? Because even the M1 from before, right? Because
No,
this is
dude,
M2.
I don't have it. I'm so choked, bro. Oh yeah, I don't have it. I'm choked. I don't have it.
I'm looking at mine. I don't think so. I think I got Intel. But
I've been
I'm ready for an
tempted.
upgrade, boys. I'm ready for an upgrade.
You're up
We
for
got-
an
Yeah,
You ready
I got
for the
i7.
NIA studio? We got a
Oh
studio
my
coming.
Oh my goodness, guys! If I think we're all gonna have to upgrade, man. If we want that faux CNBC look.
We got it going. All right. So yeah, so that is quite interesting. I mean, Trung, you've Mr. History teacher right now, so I'm quite curious to dig into it a little bit more. Could you talk a little bit about like Taiwan Semiconductor company and like how this ties in on the global scale? Do you know much about that?
I mean, we could probably spend a whole episode talking about Intel and Taiwan Semiconductors, because Intel losing the lead was just so devastating, right? It's just so devastating on so many levels for America from a geopolitical standpoint. It's like, so the problem with Intel too is their business model is that they want to design chips and they want to manufacture. So they're fully integrated. And that's really rare now, because Taiwan Semiconductors, how they barged into the market, now they're $700 billion companies. They're like, we're not going to design chips. We're only going to make them. But we're going to learn how to make the highest and most innovative and most difficult chips. But then everybody else can create designs for them. So Apple sends their designs to Taiwan Semiconductors, right? Other manufacturers that want to do car chips, Tesla chips, right? They'll send it to Taiwan Semiconductors to manufacture them. So they separated the design component from the actual manufacturing, whereas Intel still does both. Having said that, Intel now actually realizing where the industry is headed, they're devoting $100 billion over the next decade to have third-party manufacturing. But the question people will always have, competitors in the space, is, hey, if I send my design to Intel, how do I know that I'm going to get priority versus an Intel chip, right? So they're actually trying to separate those two parts of the businesses. And something recently actually just happened is like Global Foundries, it just filed to go public. They are a semiconductor manufacturing company. They used to be part of AMD, but AMD spun them out for the same reason, right? It's because it's so expensive to have I think it costs billions of dollars to open one of these factories, right? And Taiwan Semiconductors is spending $30 billion in capital expenditures this year, maybe 20, 30 billion. So the whole point is that the way, if you were to look at the semiconductor industry, it's being separated out to design and manufacturing. That's kind of the simplistic way of thinking about it. But yeah, So
Trung, to clarify, on Apple's side, they design these chips.
They're designed, yeah. They are
but
designed.
They're still being manufactured by Taiwan Semiconductor or someone like that?
Yeah, that's right.
Got it. Okay. And then Intel is the same? They design but then get manufactured by someone else?
Oh, wait, for Intel?
Yeah.
No, they're doing their own, which is why
they do both.
Yeah, they do both.
Okay.
They're fully integrated, which was a hindrance over
in the past.
Yeah. But now they brought in a new CEO, Pat Gelsinger. I think that's his name. I forgot his name, but he used to be an old Intel employee, left to work at VMware, I think, and came back. But the whole point is that he is supposed to be kind of this engineer mindset, whereas Intel for a while had kind of these managerial minds. But he's supposed to come in and rethink about how Intel can compete. I mean, we could literally spend. Yeah,
I think it's definitely an intro. Maybe we do a whole episode on it, but yeah, good to dip our toe in it this time. But yeah, the summary of what I saw, there was a graph going around. I don't have it linked here, but it basically showed Intel's chips versus the M2 chip. And I thought that was a beautiful summary. Basically, how much better they perform, essentially, especially when they're designing the hardware and they're creating these chips specifically for the hardware. You just create a much more seamless experience, basically. So it seems to be making sense and working out for them. All right, anything else on the Apple stuff, boys, before we talk about creature toads and NFTs?
I think I don't know how sharp of a transition we can make this, but the Dorsey Bitcoin mining silicon chip.
Yeah, let's just talk about that now. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect transition. And I think, Trung, you probably have a better insight into this, is how realistic is it given the concentration of development of silicon chips among, is that crazy? Is the reason that is concentrated in so few companies right now, there's geopolitical reasons for that, correct?
Yeah, no, I think, we're kind of teasing this out a little bit, but I mean, I'll bring up a couple points. Is like, so what makes Dorsey? So just to confirm it, we're talking about how Dorsey wants to manufacture silicon chips potentially for Bitcoin mining and make it very focused on that vertical. Is that right?
He wants to build like a consumer-focused hardware product for Bitcoin mining, akin to like a Square, checkout module where you would just get it, plug it into your iPhone or the wall or whatever the hell, and it's user-friendly and it just gets you going and it decentralizes Bitcoin even further. But it's a hardware product, obviously.
Yeah, so I think so I'd like to throw a couple concepts out there and have you guys hash on it. I think we definitely touched on this before about how Dorsey, Twitter, and Square might be better placed for Web3 and crypto for a lot of reasons, right? Than a Facebook. So we talk about Facebook is talking about quote unquote Metaverse. So we know Jack Dorsey loves Bitcoin. It's in his profile whatever. His profile.
Download his
Twitter,
bio.
Right?
Yeah.
Download his bio, people. It just says Bitcoin. But they also have less baggage because they haven't been able to ship as many products that have been quote unquote successful, right? Twitter kind of is the same as it was 5-10 years ago, the use cases for, right? So there seems to be, once they clear out a lot of the technical debt, which is what has slowed the product development, and that's why they're trying so many things now, right? It looks like they're in this experimental phase. But yeah, it's like, it's so hard to do. But I think to your point, what's interesting, Jack, is like, because they have such strong consumer brands, is like, I mean, dude, you talk about it all the time, right? You own the audience. It's like, could they be the one that bridges into the crypto world versus a Facebook, right? What gravitas does Facebook have in crypto? None. It's all its crypto projects have gone to shit. They keep redesigning the DM, whatever its project is called now. I don't even know what it's called now. Whereas Twitter, they probably have the backing, or even they're way more tied into the crypto community just because of Twitter, right? It's like, it's not even close.
And Jack Dorsey is like really he's about that life, as I'd say.
Yeah, he's about
the
life.
Bitcoin life anyway. Maybe not everything, but
I think even the design of Twitter is kind of, obviously it's a centralized business, but it is an open network to the greatest degree among all of the social networks that exist, right? And people interact with the Twitter brand in a much more, like, you remember when Facebook went offline a couple of weeks ago and Twitter, I think, tweeted out, said, hello, literally everyone.
Yeah.
They get,
brilliant.
I know hundreds of millions of impressions on that thing, and people interact with it. Like, Twitter, I think, is where culture is documented, and Facebook is where culture is kind of like phasing out. It's a really interesting, like, if you had a adoption curve of like where news and where things that are happening right now are talked about, it's probably Twitter first, and then on the late end of the bell curve, you have the Facebooks of the world. So I think, like, even before, you can see why Dorsey and Bitcoin have there's an affinity there, because it's almost in the product design of Twitter and Square and Tidal soon. We don't know much about that, but that's going to be an interesting.
Well, there's a news piece actually that came out a couple days ago, Cash App Studios. I mean, we touched about this actually. Is like they're gonna start. I think it's not even lending. They might be just giving grants to artists based on information that they can gather from them, from Twitter, from Tidal. And I mean, we've touched on this. Is like they are better placed to probably underwrite culture if they can combine Twitter and Square. They can front the money because they know they'll be able to make it back in some capacity, right? I think with Square, it's very simple, right? They'll give out grants to artists that they see are high potential, or the equivalent of grants, because those artists, basically the only thing they have to do in return is like pimp up Cash App, right? And once you get these guys in a Cash App, or these girls in a Cash App, you monetize them through crypto trading, which I wish I had a year ago, instead of trying to buy from Fidelity, which doesn't do crypto, or they'll do it if you do a minimum $100,000 buy. So anyways, that's not me being salty, but I'm just going to put it out there.
The money layer that Facebook failed to implement because their plans were too grandiose, right? It's like, we're going to invent a currency. I think Facebook has like pay and stuff, like they facilitate that stuff, but they never became the same level as like the Cash App thing. I think just breaks out of the platform too. It's like, if you're buying something on Facebook Marketplace, you still use Cash App. If you're setting in a bill in a restaurant, you still use Cash App, because I think they get culture and they got it out more effectively than Facebook would launch their payment product, which, kind of is integrated inside their DMs, and probably, there are places in the world that probably use it a lot, but where culture is like maybe the United States culture is the biggest export, like those guys have figured out a way to just be married up with that from the bottom up. Pretty
and
fascinating.
I think the other thing is, Jack, to what you're saying, they've got 100 different things. Like this is one of 100, whereas for Square, they're doing quite a few things, but they're a lot more focused than say Facebook is, obviously because of the size. The only thing I could see working really well, and maybe we're completely oblivious to it because we don't use it here, is like WhatsApp, like payments or something within WhatsApp. Like I don't know how that even works, but where they've got like 1 billion users that actually communicate, especially in the developing world or outside the US anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's one to watch. I haven't seen any numbers on it.
I think they're just like more patient with their design as well. I know they're trying a lot of stuff now, but like they've been very patient with like the one feature MVP. Like where Facebook is just like constantly acquiring stuff, trying to mash shit together. And just like you go on the news feed, it's got some new fucking bubble on the side or box going over the top of this thing. And Twitter is just like, here's the feed, here's where you tweet, here's the trends, right? They've done a few things with like how they curate stuff, but they've been patient. I'm sure they could have made more money in the short term by like banging ads between every tweet. And Facebook, I think, just went the way of like directly, you're kind of under no false assumptions about how Facebook makes money. I think the ad experience on Twitter is so subtle that you almost forget that it's a thing, right? It's like,
but that's why the ads kind of shit on Twitter.
Right.
They don't work.
But that's why they haven't made as much money in the short term. But if you're thinking about being like a more like pervasive cultural force over the long term, then you don't want to. You're like the short term actions that extract profit are slowing down the growth of the network, because Facebook got huge, but it's also the amount of, I think the people who use Twitter are so attached to it, and the communities
insane,
and the cultures
man.
that are like born from Twitter is really nuts.
Dude, Facebook is not addictive at all. You know what I mean? It's like when people say, "Oh, you're addicted,"
but
to
Instagram
Facebook,
is though, right?
IG is. To be fair, IG is.
But it's not. But you don't build community in the same way. Like I don't think this whole NFT economy would exist without Twitter.
Well, Instagram, you can't even share. I mean, you can't even retweet, quote unquote, on Instagram, right?
Technically, you can, but it doesn't work the same way. Yeah.
You
share a story or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say the equivalent is sharing on story there, but it's not the same open. Obviously, like very different.
Way more friction in those processes, and it's like the difference between your high school network versus, Twitter is, I think, basically a valid replacement for every social network, maybe with the exception of YouTube, if you think of it as a social network, which maybe it isn't. It's more of a search engine. Long Twitter, not financial advice, not investment advice.
Definitely not.
Well, dude, I'm long Twitter, and it has not been good financial advice. So
no,
definitely. Same.
You got to see the vision, though. This is like 2009 Bitcoin. I mean, this is not the action of a man who thinks in quarters, right? He's thinking long term.
Yeah, fair enough, man.
So, boys, anything else on Square, though? Because I know we also were sharing this article or write-up Pomp had written called Square as a Bitcoin company. I would replace Bitcoin with crypto. I think he obviously uses the word Bitcoin because he's very pro-Bitcoin.
That's one other thing. Like one other interesting thing is like, they're doing this NFT verification, and like that's obviously going to be an Ethereum native. Yeah, as far as we know, that's going to happen, right? There's a Twitter product designer that I think tweeted out a literal preview of the interface that they're working on.
Yeah, I saw that.
All the tipping though is Cash App, Venmo, I think, and Strike. So the monetization layer for tipping, it doesn't include Ethereum right now, but they're going to build in this NFT verification. Yeah. And Dorsey did that troll of the hashtag ETH is the
Ethiopia
flag.
Yeah. Wait, can you tell Jack? Can you tell what that is, just in case?
Yeah, so I can't even remember. I think people were just like hassling them, like Bitcoin. When you do hashtag Bitcoin on Twitter, automatically renders that orange B after it, And I think a lot of the Ethereum community is like, oh, when are we getting it for ETH? And I think it seems like an obvious try. I think the way that they covered it up was during the Olympics. So he just tweeted out #ETH, and there's an Ethiopian flag that comes up after it.
Brilliant.
And the reason you think it's a troll is because you do that for any other country. I don't know if the flag.
I don't
came
think
up,
Pakistan's is showing up, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. So it seems like he's kind of, maybe there's some internal. I think the reason they're not ignoring the NFT thing in the short term, at least on Ethereum, is because there's like such a it's. Twitter has been this really integral layer for growing the NFT economy. Obviously, like social, the profile picture, which is the like banner NFT product at the moment. Twitter has been the network that's propelled all of that. So seems like a play to like keep those people interested. But you know what? Maybe a long-term thing is like Tidal does an NFT platform on Bitcoin or some way they figure that out. There's a Square NFT, but I don't know. It seems like he's like a consolidator over time rather than make a bunch of new branches for the sake of it.
I think he just genuinely is like a bit of a maximalist.
He is,
Bitcoin maxi, right? So like, I mean, they did, like you said, they launched that NFT experiment, which was, I think, Ethereum based. They actually had their own NFTs or something, right? This was a good few months ago. But I think from like listening to him and other people, like even Pomp, like their opinion is like Bitcoin will become that base layer, and then all these other layer twos will be created, like smart contracts, etc. Which are already, there's people
Stacks,
who are doing
right?
that.
I mean,
Stacks is that.
With Patrick Stanley, City.
Exactly, and like that's it's a valid opinion. Like I don't think you're crazy for thinking that. At the same time, you can't deny there's a huge head start from Ethereum, right? So yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing. I think the other thing I will say in this same piece, Pomp, well, I don't know if it was this piece or the one from yesterday, but even though he is pretty much a Bitcoin maximalist himself, kind of, like I don't know if he would officially call himself that. But like recently, I think, what was his name? Mark Cuban was getting in a little bit of a beef with Bitcoin maximalists on Twitter Spaces. There was this kind of like
I
funny thing.
That was awesome.
Did you catch that, right? And there was just like some funny stuff going on there. And I will say like Pomp was like, look, this is kind of stupid, right? Like this guy is clearly pro Bitcoin. Like you're not gonna, like he can have valid, like critiques of what's going on. And like, you're not gonna be able to move anything forward by just saying, have fun staying poor to Mark Cuban, right? You know what I mean? So it's, I think there's a small minority who are very loud, but most people are fairly reasonable with it, including Pump, I think.
Well, it's Jack's point, right? It's like you're not going to get to Bill, or even your point you guys talk about, you're not going to get to billion wallets just fucking shouting at people like, hey, you're like, have fun staying poor, like just dumping on them left, right, and center if they're not buying like every single dip and selling their clothes and their firstborn child to buy the dip.
Well, I mean, even Jack, today you tweeted, well done, or like congratulations to all the coins, right? Because obviously a lot of people like Bitcoin all-time highs, and that to me it just seemed like such an obvious yet ignored point of view for a lot of people. Everyone gets in these camps. It comes back to like episode 0 where we talked about religion with Upside, like 2 different camps, and Fiat Fan brought out the history of Protestants versus Catholics or something like that. I don't know. But it's just like, man, there's many use cases. Everything's growing. Like stop fucking around with it. So anyway, I think that's a very interesting way to wrap up the Square stuff. Anything else before we talk about keeping NFTs secure, boys?
No, I think this is perfect. This is perfect for, well, I mean, it's doubly perfect because I don't know if listeners will have noticed by now, my internet's so bad today that if Jack can just go,
no one knows,
for the next 20 minutes and Bilal just hits him with cues. I mean, I'm going to be here. I keep on seeing that Zoom prompt, internet connection unstable. I'm not liking it. I'm telling you right now, I'm not liking it. Zoom, quit showing that to me. But you guys go, let's hit it. Let's hit the NFT.
That's cool. Yeah. So look, I think we're going to give a quick overview of what happened recently, because the main point of this section is to talk about how to keep NFTs secure. This is something I need education on as well myself. So we'll get on to like hardware wallets and like essentially two-factor authentication and stuff like that. But there was a story that happened, by the time you're listening to this a few days ago, where Creature Toads was hacked, right? The Discord for Creature Toads. So backing up a second, everyone who listens to this regularly knows what Cryptodes were, right? Half of you are holding them apparently. Then there's another NFT project called Creatures or something, pretty cool stuff. And someone created a hybrid of these two things. And I personally think they were actually really well made, like really cool art. And long story short, the Discord got hacked and the scammer made what's called a fake mint. So people would click through and think they're minting some sort of NFT, connect their wallet, and then their wallet would get rinsed, right? So their ETH would jump out of it. Maybe NFTs would jump out of it. I'm not sure. I think it was just ETH from what I can understand. And the headline was 89 ETH was stolen from lots of people. I think it was a few hundred people. And that's around 330K in US dollars in today's rate. But the crazy thing is, this was all while I was asleep. But apparently the hacker, who's 17 years old, returned the money. And now he then eventually jumps on a Twitter Spaces with the team himself. And I think I'd read that the Dapper Labs CEO even jumped on it for a minute because they had a hack as well. There were lots of Discord hacks basically. Our boy Tom Osman posted in his Discord chat that be careful, don't click any of these links right now because there's a lot of things going on. So that's a long way of saying, there's this stuff is happening all the time. And even myself, I've held crypto for ages and I've had, hardware wallets for ages as well. And I feel fairly confident with those or comfortable with those. But with NFTs, there's just that feeling of when you're about to transfer ETH or especially NFTs, you're just waiting a few minutes to send it over and you're just worried it's lost, right? And it costs a little bit more with the gas fees. So Jack, you're our resident NFT expert, right? And I know you've obviously got your own little portfolio, to put it in the lightest, of NFTs, some of the big blue chip ones and hundreds that you've also, some of them you've sold yourself as well. So for someone listening to this, if you were trying to say, here's a recommendation of how to keep things secure, how should someone think about this?
I think the first recommendation, and we've got a thread that we should put in the Telegram and the under this video or in the show notes of the podcast. But the first thing, I think, if you're any amount of money past $5, you should be using the hardware wallet, which is going to gate every transaction you make. So that's not going to keep you 100% safe. You're still going to have to use judgment, but a hardware wallet essentially means it's going to ask you for physical confirmation of a transaction. So if you're minting something on a website, it's then going to ask you, it's going to flash up on the hardware wallet and say, confirm the contract address, confirm the amount, press yes. So that stops your wallet getting drained if someone takes remote access of your screen, or you give someone your seed phrase, which
you've got a rogue Chrome extension, which I've heard happens to a lot of people.
Right.
Well.
There's and I think we're basically at the beginning of this, right? Some of the most talented criminals in the world will be figuring out how to do this because it's just now blipping into the mainstream, getting into Coinbase, NFT wallets, and we're only at 100,000 OpenSea or 200,000 OpenSea accounts. So it's this lucrative at this scale. It's kind of a crazy thing, right? So I think the cardinal rule is seed phrase. So once you have a hardware wallet or any crypto wallet, you have a seed phrase, never type it in anywhere. So there's varying degrees of security you can take physically with that. You can put it on steel, stick it under your kettlebell. You can put 2 copies of it in different locations. I think there's also a larger discussion to be had about what happens if you get hit by a bus and if you got the Balaji portfolio going on, your family needs to know where this stuff is and how to get access to it. So that's another kind of tangential point. But when you're setting all this stuff up and you got your seed phrases, you have your next of kin or whoever would be in charge of your assets. If you were no longer capable of accessing them, all of this information needs to go to them as well, but never through a computer. So keyloggers, and there's all these creative ways people can get in touch with you. One of the huge ones is Discord, which you mentioned for this one. So this is a new one where they've actually compromised the official Discord server. Because normally even a week ago, I would have used verify the Twitter account is real, go to the Discord link in the Twitter account, because you can essentially clone anything. And that's the crazy thing about digital, right? You can make the Discord look like it's the same Discord. You could basically copy all the activity and put it back in. It would be very difficult to do, but I wouldn't put it past people who are, if you can make a $500,000 in an evening, then people are going to get creative with it. All the normal phishing stuff's like, don't click unauthorized links, don't answer DMs to people that are like, hey, I'm giving away a CryptoPunk.
Yeah, and that happens a lot in Discord, right? Like, there's a lot of people
you got to turn your DMs off at this point. If you're in any of these servers, that's one of the actual, if there was one feature that Discord is like, I think this is just cannibalizing their adoption, I think, is letting people that are just in a server with just send you a DM. Like, you don't have that experience on Slack where you log in the morning and there's like 400 unopened DMs and they're all just bullshit. Like, hey, come and press this button. And, it's like the spam folder of an email essentially is like on the front page of your Discord. It's nuts. So just turn DMs off in Discord. That's another one. And I think, like, verifying the contract address that you're interacting with is really important as well. But this is getting more difficult because if the Discord is compromised and someone's telling you that the real smart contract address is the fake one, then you're interacting with it.
So this part, Jack, just to jump in for a second, this part is like the due diligence part, right? Like, there's the software, hardware part. So if you've got a Metamask wallet in the browser, or you've got a hardware wallet, or you've got another Ethereum wallet elsewhere on your phone, like, obviously store the seed phrase offline, not in a password manager, not in not in Evernote
Notes
or something
or
like
whatever.
that. Yeah, you need the physical copy. What I've heard from some other people when I've researched this, like you said, is if you've got like a 24 seed phrase or whatever, like there's 24 words that you write down. And for people who don't know, that essentially means you can reset up the wallet. So like if you lost access to it, your computer crashed or got stolen, you can go and sign up again with that seed phrase. So anyone who has that seed phrase can, redeem the wallet. I think a lot of people listening to this already know that. But I think where people get a little confused is like, oh, where am I going to put this? So like, for example, you can, people write on pieces of paper, but there's fires. They get the house burgled or something like that, which is obviously extreme, but that can happen to people. But yeah, so having multiple copies in different locations, ideally. So I've heard people saying like the first 12 words I'm going to put in one location, the other one in another location. So like it's very unlikely someone can get all of those things. But then specifically on the hardware wallet, let's just go into that, because to explain how that works, that it's not, you're not like storing Bitcoin on the hardware wallet, right? It's storing your private keys in this encrypted device. So that device is not interacting with the internet really. It's kind of stored in its own place. So you're using that as like two-step verification, essentially, the way we're used to doing that for email or other stuff like that. So I think, making sure, the other basic one is honestly making sure you're not using the same passwords, obviously, which is like across the internet, but like you'll be surprised how many people still do that. And having, making sure, because like there's a lot of hacks that put your credentials on some random website, right? And like they can use those same credentials to log into Coinbase or whatever like that. So yeah, that's that. So then let's just talk about the hardware wallet for this is getting a little tactical, but just to confirm, what is the wallet that you're sending it to? Is it just a normal Ethereum wallet, or is it like because there's like the different tokens and stuff. I'm not 100% sure how that works. So
the hardware wallet, I use it Ledger Nano S with MetaMask, and you can spin up a new wallet address with a hardware wallet. So the hardware wallet could be the verification device for all number of different currencies. So that's like a firmware update that you would do on the wallet. Right? Yeah. So you can have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, whatever else in supported by one hardware wallet. And Yeah, it's just gonna ask you to verify the transaction each time you run one. I don't know much outside of the MetaMask experience. The ledger isn't my favorite. A lot of people have said the Trezor is a little bit superior, so I might give that one a try. But it's safe. Like, it's just a little janky in some instances, but it's I sleep well at night with the stuff stored on it, or at least stuff gate kept by it. It's not stored on it, right? That's another misnomer that is.
And just one thing to add on the hardware wallet. I know we're getting tactical, but this is how it's useful. Make sure you buy it from the official site, not necessarily like Amazon or eBay, especially because there were reports of people selling like like fake ones,
compromised ones.
Compromised, exactly. So they've got some malware on it and they can track everything. So that's another annoying thing. And also to call out, like I have one of those as well, but they did get hacked a few years ago, I think, and it released like everyone's addresses and stuff like that into some crazy place. So yeah, there's all of these things come with risk, but I think that's probably worth doing. So to clarify, it's just basically you've set up the hardware wallet with the Metamask wallet and it's linked, right? Because if you go to Metamask, there's something like in the settings, you can do something hardware wallet, right?
Yeah, Metamask with Ledger, I think it's called, yeah.
Exactly. All right, cool.
I use a hot wallet as well, which is like inadvisable for some stuff. Like, but that's like, when you're doing, like when you're trying to mint something in 2 minutes and you've got to do the 8-digit code on the ledger, you're like
walk through the hot wallet. What exactly is a hot wallet?
So that's just living in or you access this strictly through the browser plugin in Chrome. So it's the exact same experience. You just type in your
password, but there's no second, like two-factor equivalent.
Yeah, the exact same experience, except you don't have that secondary authentication. And that's like, I need to phase out that behavior immediately because this stuff is just getting so sophisticated.
But having said that, Jack, in the episode with Tom Osman, we talked about why you didn't buy an EtherRock. Because you didn't have anything in your hot wallet.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
So you left 10 mil on the table, brother.
climbing.
I've listened to the episode a number of times. I know the exact thing I said when Jack, what's your excuse? You're like, I had nothing in the hot wallet, didn't want to pull out the ledger, didn't think it was worth it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, dude.
I mean, yeah, that's another thing is like, it's kind of a high stakes game, right? Like, let's be honest, that if this is your, well, we've made this very clear across all of our episodes, not investment advice. Like, this should not be treated with the same degree of certainty or reliance as an investment vehicle that is FDIC insured or whatever else, right? Because it's absolutely is not.
Go buy the Bitcoin futures, people. That is covered under the commodities,
the boomer buy
futures, and the boomer buy.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sad. I think this Ethereum, the MetaMask experience with NFTs is really where it gets kind of crazy because you don't realize how. I think people don't quite get how easy it is to like spin up these like attempts to steal money, and it's running alongside these very legitimate projects too, right? I don't think Bitcoin had this issue in the same way. There's obviously like those dumbass Twitter things where it's like, send me 1 Bitcoin, I'll send you 10 or whatever they do.
Oh, you mean Chamath7229 on Twitter? Chamath just giving away
with the blue check mark, and we still can't get blue check marks.
Yeah. Didn't Elon? Someone got control of his account. What did they tweet? Send Bitcoin to this address.
Right? Yeah, they
idiots.
You got idiots. We'll do a quick joke on that. Was like Matt Levine, Bloomberg writer that we talk about often. It's just like, listen, man, if you're gonna do that with Elon's account, it's very simple, right? You buy some puts and you say, hey, we're not hitting our numbers, and then Tesla tanks, and then you get your puts, right? Of all the things you could have done, this is what you do.
Yeah, it was weak. Yeah. So just I think it's like a byproduct of all the excitement, and you're taking advantage of like people who are just deliriously clicking stuff because they think they're about to, get a 900x return on a $200 cartoon.
And a lot of this is based on the time, right? Like you want to be early, right? Which is the kind of part of the sense of urgency comes from, oh, let me do this before they run out, which is why they work in the way they do. but I was reading some of the comments, and because I listened to the Twitter Spaces with the hacker on YouTube, someone had posted it, and like some of the comments were like, "Look, this was even my fault. Like I clicked the link and minted it before even doing any due diligence." Like I'm not saying it's all their fault, because clearly the Discord was compromised. And just to clarify, they've returned all the money. One, because the hacker had done it. Two, apparently the owners of, or the people who started Creature Toads had said they would have to do it out of their own pocket anyway, because it's obviously a bad look for them. But yeah, it was a pretty good reminder, like for everyone, like to take this stuff seriously. So to quickly summarize, making sure all your email credentials are good, use a hardware wallet. I also uninstalled a bunch of Chrome extensions that could be like amateur hour.
Oh my God.
Or like create a new profile which doesn't have like a bunch of Chrome extensions, like as a dedicated one.
Buy a new MacBook and only use it for NFTs.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
No, but legitimately, right? Hold on. I actually had one. I want to make sure I still haven't bought an NFT yet. So this is funny. Fiat fan in full fiat mode. But I remember the one dude that got his OpenSea wallets, his NFTs jacked, he brought up a great one, was there is a 2FA that sends you a QR code. It's like, don't show anyone the QR code. That's what he said. It's like, so they did a pretty elaborate scam where they contacted him from the Discord as fake people, right? I think, Jack, I think we touched on this before, but then they're like, hey, they pretend to be like OpenSea admin. Might have even been like pretending to be like the executives at OpenSea, and they're just like, "Hey, just let me see your QR code or whatever it was, man." Anyways, that QR code, people, don't show people your QR code. That's it. That's my 2 cents.
That's it. Yeah, if anyone has any other tips, you can add them in the comments.
We got a good thread as well.
Let's share that.
Add.
Let's share it in the Telegram, and then people can go and check it out there. All right, boys, that was good. Anything else, Jack, before we lock off?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, the last thing I will say, sorry, I forgot to mention the 17-year-old who, you know, like fair play for him for giving it back. I don't know if that was because he got caught or not, but who knows? The funniest thing, to be fair, was he did say, "Can we wrap this up? I've got school tomorrow," which I thought was absolutely hilarious.
Legendary.
That is like something that's going to be referenced for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's also like a weird incentive to do it because of the traceability of it as well.
Yeah,
like
he'll get hired, right? Somebody's going to pay to give this guy the bag. He's so talented. Yeah. He's clearly talented.
Yeah.
Just turn him into a white hat.
Yeah, that's it. All right, boys. Anything else? I know we covered a lot. I think we
covered a lot today. Well, let's do one last thing. If my internet connection allows, let me go through some of these. This is my greatest.
Chung was getting roasted.
My Nirvana. You guys saw some hilarious. Of this? This is amazing. Let's go through it. So
for people listening, Chung is sharing responses or like quote retweets of his epic shitpost on Squid Game. So.
Well, I'll talk through the mechanics. I think Jack will. We have talked about the memification of content, and like, I actually looked back at this tweet I did and just kind of admired it. It's like, it was just the perfect it would just hit the crossroads of shit posting. Two things happened. It's like you have this Squid Game, this Netflix, the South Korean Netflix show, which is completely taken over the world. You have Bitcoin hitting all-time highs, and then you just have the dumbest possible takeaway from this tweet that I did. So the TLDR of this tweet is that I just talked about how it took 10 years to make Squid Game. Netflix says that it created $900 million of value. But then I brought in the fact that this guy, the director of Squid Game, could have made $900 million if he had just invested $150 in a Bitcoin in 2009, which is like it's the dumbest take ever. Yeah. And then, but the whole point being is that 80% of Twitter apparently doesn't have a sense of humor. Somebody brought it up actually. Gary Tan, a VC over at Initialize, he commented on this, and he basically said, he's like, "Oh my God, it looks like socialist Twitter got a hold of this tweet." And there's a whole subsegment of Twitter which are basically just socialist and people LARPing as communists. And the comments are just incredible. Look at some of these names. So David, socialist martial artist, says, "Could you imagine seeing the world this way? My answer, of course, is I don't see it this way. It's a joke, you knob. And then, and then there's a guy by the name of Communist Kaju Skeleton. This guy sounds like a real capitalist. He goes, I effing hate these nerds so much. And then hold on, let me get some other good names here.
This is reminding me, Shugazi Socials. This is reminding me of that viral video of the comrades in a room.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? We shared that was an epic video.
Well, dude, here it is. Look at these names. Yeah. Showgazy Socialist says this is one of the most evil tweets ever. Let me just go through. Let me see if I can find any more names. Yeah, no more of the names here. This one was good. J.R. Huang says this BT Maximus. Wait. Oh, this one's great.
Little does he know is we're speaking to Fiat fan as of 6 months ago.
The guy that bought Bitcoin at 55,000. So this person wrote cryptards are brainlets. Mihai doesn't realize.
I can't like that one.
Mihai didn't even realize I couldn't figure out how to buy Bitcoin a year ago when it was at 10,000. So these people, the joke's on you guys.
Sarcasm doesn't translate, mate. All three of us, we've all lived in the States, right? Like clearly lots of Americans get sarcasm, obviously. But I have to say, coming from the UK, where a lot of our humor is like straight-faced humor, right? Like very dry. Like
AF.
My sense of humor 100% had to change. Like I would be getting in trouble as soon as I got here. I'd say something with a straight face, and people thought I was being 100% serious. I don't know if that's happened to you guys, but I definitely had to adjust when I moved.
You gotta be like, yo, just watch a Ricky Gervais special, people. Just watch a Ricky
Oh my God, special. Legend. All right, boys. I think we can wrap it up, but. Look, that was a solid one. Let us know what you think of this in the comments below or in the Telegram. There's lots going on. We got more coming for you guys. This is just the start with NIA. We officially incorporated, or we are in the process of incorporating. So that is stuff to watch out for. We mentioned that in the Telegram as well. And as always, this is not investment advice. All vibes, no facts. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.